At dawn, 1,500 motorcycles lined the street like a steel river. Grace Williams stood trembling in the church ashes, unable to process what she was seeing. But to understand why these terrifying strangers came, we must return 5 days earlier, when she gave her last $20 to a man she'd never met. 5 days earlier, Grace Williams, 72 years old, stood before St. Matthew's Community Church ruins. The Los Angeles wildfires had devoured 43 years of her service in 3 hours. The insurance adjuster's voice still echoed. Pre-existing issues, $43,000, rebuilding costs $300,000. She sat on the curb counting her money. $173 total. Her entire life savings, gone keeping the church operational. The congregation, 35 elderly members, had nothing to give. "Sister Grace," Deacon Marcus Thompson hurried over, expensive suit flapping. "I've been thinking. Property values are rising. We should sell the land, distribute the money, join other churches. It's practical." Grace's eyes held 7 decades of struggle. "This church fed 500 families during the riots. We housed 12 families after the earthquake. This isn't just a building. This is holy ground." "Holy ground doesn't pay bills." Thompson walked away without looking back. Grace forced herself to stand despite her aching knees. Her late husband Robert had always said, "Grace, you got a spine made of steel and a heart made of honey." Robert had passed 7 years ago, ushering at this church when his heart simply stopped. She walked to the gas station 3 blocks north, bought 99-cent water, and stood outside drinking slowly. That's when she heard the motorcycle. The engine note was deep, authoritative, impossible to ignore. A massive black and chrome bike rolled in, its rider equally imposing. Leather jacket covered in patches, arms sleeved with tattoos, gray beard braided with metal beads. Grace watched him try 3 credit cards at the pump. Each one beeped rejection. His shoulders sagged. Do you know what it feels like when your body screams to walk away but your soul won't let you? Every survival instinct told Grace that men who looked like this were dangerous. The news said so, the neighbors said so, even Thompson would say so. But Robert's voice echoed. Judge a man by his actions, not his appearance. She walked over slowly. "Excuse me, sir. I couldn't help noticing you're having trouble. Do you need help with gas?" The biker turned. Up close, Grace saw his eyes, not threatening, just deeply tired. His patches read, Steel Pilgrims MC, and his name tag said, Marcus. "Ma'am, I appreciate it, but I can't take money from someone who needs it more." Grace smiled, the smile that had comforted crying children for 4 decades. "Son, I'm 72. I've learned that need isn't about who has less. Sometimes it's about who needs help right this moment. How much do you need?" $20 would get me home to Riverside, but ma'am, take it. She pressed the bill into his hand. "And when you get where you're going, you help somebody else. That's how it works." Marcus stared at the 20 like it might burn him. "Why? You don't know me." Matthew 25, verse 35. "I was a stranger, and you invited me in." That's all I need to know. Marcus's jaw worked silently. "What's your name?" "Grace Williams, elder at St. Matthew's Community Church, or what's left of it." She gestured south. "Wildfires took it 5 days ago." "I'm sorry." Marcus folded the 20 reverently. "Mrs. Williams, I swear on my life, this money will come back tenfold. I don't know how yet, but it will. I don't need repayment. I need you to get home safe." He pumped exactly $20, mounted his bike, then turned back. "Mrs. Williams, what church?" "St. Matthew's, corner of 42nd and Avalon." He nodded sharply and rode away, the rumble fading into Los Angeles evening. By the way, if this story has already grabbed you, and we've only just begun, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Because what happens next, you'll never forget. I promise. Grace walked home slowly, the remaining $153 feeling very light. She lived in a small 3rd-floor apartment 4 blocks from the ruins. From her window, she could see the charred steeple pointing at the sky like an accusing finger. Her phone buzzed, voicemail from Thompson. "Grace, the board is voting tomorrow on selling the property. Prepare yourself for the inevitable. This is business, nothing personal." Nothing personal. 43 years of her life. Grace prayed, not for miracles, but for strength to accept what came next. Outside, the sun set in shades of orange and purple that looked like flames. Somewhere in Riverside, 150 kilometers away, Marcus was making a phone call that would change everything. But Grace didn't know that yet. The next morning, 6:47 a.m., Grace's phone rang. "This is Jennifer Hartley from City Planning. We received a development proposal from Thompson Real Estate for 42nd and Avalon. Are you authorized to represent the church?" Grace sat up, heart hammering. "What proposal? I'm the senior elder. Nobody told me anything." Marcus Thompson filed paperwork yesterday to rezone from religious to commercial. The application claims unanimous board approval. There was no vote, no meeting. A pause. "Mrs. Williams, contact your board immediately. Someone's trying to expedite this." The line went dead. Grace dressed quickly, fingers fumbling buttons. The bus took 35 agonizing minutes. When she arrived, Thompson stood with two men in hard hats studying blueprints on his Mercedes hood. "Mixed-use development," Thompson was saying. "Ground floor retail, 3 floors luxury apartments. Property's worth $2.7 million. Deacon Thompson. Grace's voice cut like a blade. All three turned. Thompson's face cycled through surprise, guilt, defiance, before settling on condescending patience. "Grace, I was going to call you. After you filed paperwork without consulting the congregation?" Grace stepped closer. Despite being 30 centimeters shorter, Thompson retreated. "This isn't your church to sell. It's not a church anymore. It's a burned lot. Unless you've magically found $300,000 overnight, it stays that way." Thompson rolled up blueprints. "The board meets tomorrow. We'll make it official." "You mean you'll pressure everyone until they agree?" "I mean I'll present the only realistic option." His voice hardened. "The sale gives every member $45,000. That's real help. What's your plan? Pray harder?" "My plan is to rebuild, to serve this community like we've done for 78 years. With what money? With what congregation?" Thompson shook his head. "Grace, I respect what this meant. Past tense. But I gave a man $20 yesterday." Thompson blinked. "What?" "A stranger. A biker. He needed gas. I gave him my last $20. The construction workers exchanged glances. Thompson stared like she'd announced she was flying to the moon. "You... what?" "He needed help. I helped him." "You gave $20 to a biker?" Thompson's volume exploded. "Do you know what you've done? We're finalizing a property deal, and you're funding criminals. What if his gang targets us? What if he was just a man who needed help?" "That's not all that matters," Thompson was shouting now, and people on the street were stopping. "You're supposed to be a leader. You're supposed to make responsible decisions. Instead, you're throwing money at gangs while the congregation suffers." Mrs. Chen from the corner market came outside. Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez appeared on their porch. Curtains moved in windows up and down the block. Thompson saw them and turned to face the growing audience. "Everyone should know this," his voice carried down the street. "While we're trying to help our congregation recover, Elder Grace Williams gave $20, money she claimed she didn't have, to a motorcycle gang member, a criminal. While children go hungry, while families struggle, she's funding gang activity." Grace felt the words like physical blows. Mrs. Chen's expression shifted from curious to shocked. Mr. Rodriguez shook his head slowly. Curtains fell closed, one after another. "Here's what 87% of people don't understand about kindness. It works like an echo. You throw a stone in water and circles spread farther than you can see. Grace just threw her stone. In 3 days, the echo returns as thunder." Thompson wasn't finished. "This is the judgment that let our church burn. This is why we need new leadership." "Deacon Thompson," Grace's quiet voice made him stop. "You stand on ground made holy by 78 years of service. My husband cleaned these steps every Sunday for 32 years. We baptized babies and buried the elderly and fed the hungry because that's what you do. Not because it's practical, because it's right. Right doesn't pay bills. Money does, and you threw away money on a criminal." He got into his Mercedes. The construction workers followed. Grace stood alone as engines started and vehicles drove away. She turned to face her neighbors. Mrs. Chen went back inside. The Rodriguez family disappeared. Up and down the street, every door closed, every window empty, every face hidden. In 43 years, Grace had never felt so alone. She walked to the ruins and sat on fallen wall that had once supported the choir. This was where Robert had ushered families, knowing everyone's name, everyone's struggles. She had helped a stranger in need. Her community turned its back. The morning sun climbed higher. Grace sat in ashes of everything she'd built, wondering if Thompson was right, wondering if faith was just foolishness. A text buzzed. "Board meeting tomorrow, 7 p.m., my office. Vote happens whether you attend or not. Make peace with it." Thompson Grace looked at the message. At the ruins. At the cloudless sky offering no answers. Have you ever had a moment where every choice suddenly seems wrong? Where ground you've stood on your whole life feels like quicksand? That's where Grace sat. She didn't know that 150 kilometers away, Marcus stood in a clubhouse surrounded by 200 leather-clad bikers, holding up that $20 bill like a holy relic. She didn't know that in exactly 3 days, this street would be filled with 1,500 motorcycles. She didn't know her kindness had set in motion something that would make Thompson's deal look like pocket change. All she knew was she'd done the right thing, and it cost her everything. Sometimes that's what doing the right thing costs. Grace didn't go home that night. She couldn't. The apartment felt too full of Robert's absence, too far from this sacred ground. As sunset painted Los Angeles in orange and purple, she remained on the fallen wall, watching shadows lengthen across debris. Evening air grew cold. Grace pulled her cardigan tighter. Somewhere distant, sirens wailed, the eternal city soundtrack. A helicopter passed overhead, spotlight sweeping neighborhoods still recovering from fires. She thought about Thompson's words, about $45,000 per member versus impossible dreams, about how helping Marcus had become evidence of her failure. Maybe faith is just stubbornness wearing a Sunday dress, she thought. The ruins held memories in every blackened timber. There, little Jamal Washington gave his first testimony at age 7. There, Sarah Chen married David Rodriguez in 2003. There, they held Robert's funeral, and Grace somehow found strength to thank everyone while her heart shattered. 78 years of history. Ash in 3 hours. Stop. Before we continue, remember Deacon Thompson's name, because in 72 hours, this man will be on his knees before 1,400 bikers, begging forgiveness. Her phone buzzed. "Mrs. Chen, I'm sorry about today, but people are scared. These gangs are dangerous. Please understand our position. Paul Rodriguez. With respect, Elder Grace, my wife is frightened. She saw news about motorcycle gangs. Betty Morrison. Grace, honey, I love you, but Thompson is right. We need to be smart. One by one, messages arrived. Each started with love. Each ended with distance. Each said, "You're alone." Grace turned off her phone. Stars emerged, visible even through light pollution. Grace had learned constellations from her father 70 years ago in Alabama. Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper pointing north, always north, constant in changing skies. "Robert," she whispered, "did I mess up?" The ruins offered no answer, but in memory, Robert's voice spoke. "Grace, you got a spine made of steel and a heart made of honey. Don't ever change. Don't ever change." She'd given $20 because it was right, because that's what you do when you live the teachings you've preached for 43 years. You don't just talk about loving your neighbor, you do it, and it cost her everything. Around midnight, exhaustion claimed her. She curled on the fallen wall, purse as pillow, and fell into fitful sleep full of burning buildings and disapproving faces, and Robert walking away, always walking away. She didn't know that 150 kilometers away, something remarkable was happening. Marcus had ridden straight to the Steel Pilgrims Clubhouse in Riverside at 8:30 p.m. the previous evening. He walked into the weekly meeting, interrupted everything, asked for the floor. 200 bikers turned to look. These were family, chosen, not biological, bound by loyalty rather than blood. Marcus stood before them, still in road gear, and told them about Grace Williams. She was 72, his voice rough with emotion, wearing clothes washed and mended until they were more thread than fabric, Standing outside that gas station watching me try cards that didn't work, counting cash that wasn't enough. Absolute silence filled the clubhouse. Ray, the club president, massive man in his 60s with arms like tree trunks and gray beard reaching his chest, leaned forward. She walked over. This tiny old black woman approaching a man twice her size wearing steel pilgrim's colors, asked if I needed help. I said no. You know I said no. Told her I couldn't take money from someone who needed it more. He pulled out the 20, held it high. She gave it anyway. Said, "When you get where you're going, help somebody else. That's how it works." Then told me about her church, St. Matthew's Community Church, corner of 42nd and Avalon. Burned 5 days ago. Insurance won't cover rebuilding. Deacons want to sell. Marcus's hand shook. I couldn't believe what I was seeing when she handed me that money, her last $20, to a stranger, while her whole world was burning down around her. This 20 was probably 10% of everything she owns. She gave it because I needed it. And you know the worst part? I saw her face when she mentioned the church. She's given her whole life to that place, 43 years, and it's gone. And she still has enough love to help a stranger get home. Marcus looked around, meeting eyes. Brothers, sisters, how many times have we been called criminals? How many times have cops hassled us? How many times have people clutched purses when we walk by? Heads nodded. Everyone had stories. Grace Williams didn't see any of that. She saw a human being who needed help. That's it, that's all. Marcus's voice broke. I need to pay this back. We need to pay this back. She showed us what humanity looks like. Ray stood slowly, chair scraping concrete. At 6'5" and 280 pounds, he commanded attention effortlessly, but his voice was gentle. What are you asking, Marcus? I'm asking for help rebuilding that church. Marcus's eyes swept the room. I know we've got contractors, electricians, plumbers, carpenters. Tommy runs that roofing company. Sarah's brother owns a lumber yard. We've got resources and skills and people who owe us favors. I'm asking, no, begging. Let's do something that matters. Let's show that woman kindness isn't wasted. Let's show the world what steel pilgrims really stand for. Silence stretched. Marcus felt sweat despite cool air. He'd asked for commitments before, but this was different. This was asking the entire club to commit everything to a stranger. Ray looked at Marcus for a long moment, then turned to the assembled club. Show of hands. Who's in? The response was instantaneous. 200 hands shot up without hesitation, not a single abstention. Ray smiled, transforming his scarred face into something almost angelic. Marcus, you're not begging, you're leading, and we're following. Now let's figure out how to make this happen. Planning began immediately. Tommy pulled out his phone, started calling his roofing crew past 9 p.m. Sarah texted her brother about lumber. Jake, the electrician, sketched power grids on napkins. Maria started calculating food needs. Within 30 minutes, they had framework. Within an hour, commitments from 17 Steel Pilgrims chapters across California. Within 2 hours, supply lists, work schedules, communication trees to mobilize people across 3 counties. Ray pulled Marcus aside around 11. You know this costs us, right? Money, time, favors we can't get back. Probably $40,000, $50,000 worth. I know, but Ray, you should have seen her face. Ray nodded slowly. I believe you, and I believe we need to do this. But understand something. He gripped Marcus's shoulder. This isn't just about one church or one woman. This is about who we are. We ride together, stand together, and when someone shows us real kindness, no strings attached, we honor that. We protect that. Because if we don't, what the hell are we doing out here? Marcus felt something tight in his chest loosen. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Grace Williams for reminding us what we're fighting for. Ray squeezed harder. Now go home. Sleep. We ride at dawn in 3 days. Every chapter in California rolls to 42nd and Avalon. And when we get there, we build something beautiful. Marcus rode home with tears streaming inside his helmet, $20 bill tucked safely in his wallet. Grace probably slept alone in some apartment, convinced her kindness meant nothing. She had no idea that at that moment, 1,500 bikers across California were preparing for the ride of their lives. She had no idea her $20 had just purchased proof that goodness still existed and multiplied when shared. She had no idea that in 3 days thunder would shake the ground beneath her feet. All she knew was cold and darkness and ashes of everything she'd built. Sometimes darkness comes before dawn. Sometimes you lose everything before receiving more than you imagined. Grace Williams was about to learn that lesson spectacularly. Dawn broke over California on the 3rd day. From San Diego to Sacramento, from Pacific Coast to Nevada border, Steel Pilgrims chapters were moving. Grace woke stiff and cold in the ruins, unaware her $20 kindness had triggered the largest mobilization in the club's 40-year history. In Riverside, Marcus stood in the parking lot watching sunrise paint the sky orange and gold. Around him, 200 motorcycles sat in perfect rows, chrome catching early light. Behind the bikes, a convoy of supply trucks stretched 3 blocks: lumber, roofing, electrical wire, plumbing, paint, tools. Everything needed to rebuild from ashes. Ray walked over carrying 2 coffee cups, handed one to Marcus without words. They stood in comfortable silence, 2 men who'd ridden together 15 years, who'd saved each other's lives multiple times, who knew some moments required no commentary. "Chapters reporting in," Ray finally said. "San Diego rolled out an hour ago. 130 bikes, 4 supply trucks. Oakland left midnight, 87 riders and the biggest crane you've ever seen. Tommy's cousin got us a deal. Fresno, Bakersfield, Modesto. Everyone's on the road. 1,500 riders minimum, maybe more." Marcus sipped coffee, tasting nothing. His stomach was knots. What if we can't do it? What if damage is worse than... What if we show that woman her faith in humanity wasn't misplaced? Ray interrupted gently. What if we prove kindness matters? What if we build something so beautiful everyone remembers we're all capable of being better? Here's the secret nobody tells you about brotherhood. It's not about riding together on sunny days. It's about showing up when everything's burning down. It's about turning strength toward building instead of destroying. Grace Williams is about to learn what real brotherhood looks like. A woman's voice called across the lot. "Ray! Marcus! You need to see this!" Sarah Rodriguez jogged over, phone extended. At 53, she was an original Steel Pilgrim, founding member who'd ridden with Ray since the beginning. Gray-streaked hair pulled back in practical braids, leather vest displaying patches from 40 different rallies. "Look," she turned the phone. It showed a social media post already shared 8,000 times. Text read, "Steel Pilgrims MC mobilizing for humanitarian mission. Destination, South LA. Purpose, rebuild burned church for elderly woman who showed kindness to stranger. This is what brotherhood looks like." Below, photos showed bikers loading trucks, organizing supplies, gathering across California. Comments flooded in, supportive, skeptical, hostile. But the sheer volume was staggering. "We're viral," Sarah said quietly. "People watching, news stations calling, someone from the mayor's office left messages. Marcus, you didn't just start a rebuilding project. You started a movement." Marcus felt lightheaded. "I just wanted to help one woman." "That's how movements start," Sarah smiled. "One person helping one person, then another sees it and helps someone else. Then it spreads. You know what's happening right now? Chapters not even part of this ride are organizing their own humanitarian projects. Denver Steel Pilgrims planning to rebuild a community center. Texas chapters organizing food drives. You lit a fire, Marcus, and it's spreading faster than those wildfires that burned Grace's church." The walkie-talkie on Ray's belt crackled. "Road captain to president. All Riverside riders report ready. Trucks loaded, supplies secured, waiting for your word." Ray lifted the radio. "Copy. Mount up. We ride in 10. Across the lot, engines roared to life. 200 motorcycles starting simultaneously created a wall of noise, rattling windows 3 blocks away. Marcus felt it in his chest, bones, teeth. This was power, raw, undeniable, purposeful power directed toward something good. In the next 24 hours, something will happen that 99% of people said was impossible. One woman's $20 is about to become a $300,000 miracle. Keep watching. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered without thinking. "Is this Marcus?" Elderly woman's voice, uncertain. "Yes, ma'am. Who's this?" "Betty Morrison. I'm a member of St. Matthew's Community Church. I heard you met our elder Grace Williams." "I heard what you're planning." Marcus's heart rate spiked. How did you hear? It's all over the news, son. All over social media. Everyone's talking about the motorcycle club riding to rebuild a church. Is it true? Are you really coming? Yes, ma'am. We'll be there by sunrise tomorrow. Long pause. Then quietly, why? Because Elder Williams showed me kindness when she had every reason not to. Because she gave me her last $20 when she needed it more. Because that's what you do when someone shows you what real faith looks like. You honor it. He heard Betty crying. We failed her. The whole congregation turned our backs when she needed us most. That deacon, Thompson, made it seem like she'd done something terrible, like helping you was irresponsible. We believed him. We abandoned her. Where is she now? I don't know. She's not answering her phone. Someone saw her at the ruins yesterday. I'm worried. We're riding out now. We'll find her. I promise. We'll make this right. Thank you. Betty's voice barely whispered. Thank you for seeing what we couldn't. Thank you for being better than we were. The call ended. Marcus stood still, processing, then looked at Ray. We need to move faster. Grace is alone. Her own people abandoned her. If she's been at those ruins since yesterday, say no more. Ray raised his radio. All units, this is President. We're rolling now. Route is Highway 10 to Highway 60, then surface streets to 42nd and Avalon. Maintain formation. Maintain speed limit. We're not outlaws today. We're angels. Act accordingly. Radio silence unless emergency. Let's ride. The convoy moved out like a steel river flowing through Riverside. 200 motorcycles in tight formation, flanked by supply trucks, followed by vans full of workers. Citizens stopped on sidewalks to watch, pulling out phones to record. Children pointed and waved. Some looked frightened. That many bikers moving together was intimidating. But others understood. Others smiled. Others gave thumbs up. Did you know sound can be physical force? The convoy created a pressure wave of engine noise pushing against everything. Windows vibrated. Car alarms triggered. Dogs barked. The ground pulsed with synchronized engines. Marcus rode point behind Ray, feeling Brotherhood's power at his back. This was what they were meant for, not territory disputes or bar fights or petty conflicts. This, using strength for something that mattered, using resources for someone who needed them, using their reputation, fearsome, intimidating, undeniable, to protect someone who couldn't protect herself. As they merged onto Highway 10 heading west toward Los Angeles, other chapters began joining. San Bernardino chapter, 50 bikes strong, fell into formation at mile marker 30. Their road captain radioed, San Bernardino reporting, 50 riders, 2 supply trucks. We brought roofing materials and certified roofers. Where do you need us? Fall in behind Riverside, Ray responded. Welcome to the family ride. At mile marker 45, Pomona chapter joined, 38 bikes including 6 women riders and 2 supply vans loaded with paint and decorating materials. Their president Carmen pulled alongside Ray at a rest stop. President to president, she said, voice carrying decades of earned authority. My chapter wants you to know, what you're doing matters. We've been called criminals our whole lives, harassed by cops, rejected by society, judged by appearance instead of actions. Today, we show them who we really are. Today, we prove brotherhood means something beyond ourselves. Ray nodded slowly. Today we prove Steel Pilgrims stand for something. No. Carmen's smile was fierce. Today we prove everyone, biker or banker, tattooed or clean-cut, is capable of being better than their worst assumptions. Grace Williams didn't see a criminal. She saw a human being. We're going to show her she saw correctly. The convoy continued west. As they approached Los Angeles, formation grew larger. Downtown chapter joined at Highway 60 interchange. 93 bikes, 3 supply trucks, mobile command center converted from an RV. South Bay chapter merged at Florence Avenue. 67 riders plus 2 flatbed trucks carrying generators and power tools. By the time they reached eastern edge of South Los Angeles, the convoy stretched nearly 2 kilometers. 1,418 motorcycles by actual count. 27 supply trucks, 11 passenger vans, 4 mobile workshops, 2 crane trucks, 1 mobile kitchen, and enough building materials to construct 3 churches. The sun was setting as they pulled into staging area, abandoned lot 3 blocks from 42nd and Avalon. Ray called a meeting of all chapter presidents. 18 leaders gathered in a circle, combined experience totaling over 400 years. Ray stood center. Here's the situation. Grace Williams gave Marcus $20 3 days ago. Her church burned. Insurance won't cover rebuilding. Some deacon named Thompson wants to sell for development. Congregation turned their backs on Grace for helping Marcus. She's been alone in those ruins at least 2 days. Our mission tomorrow at dawn: find Grace, secure property, start rebuilding. Questions? Carmen raised her hand. Legal issues? Property rights? Permits? City planning's on our side. Thompson tried filing paperwork without proper authorization. Property still belongs to the church. Grace is senior elder with legal standing. We got a lawyer to verify this afternoon. We're covered. Permits will file retroactively. Sometimes you ask forgiveness instead of permission. Jorge from San Diego spoke. What about the congregation, the people who abandoned her? With Grace. Ray's emphasis was deliberate. No confrontation, no judgment, no revenge. We're not here to punish. We're here to build. If they want to help, they can help. If they want to stay away, that's their choice. But nobody gets harassed. Nobody gets intimidated. We're building something beautiful, not settling scores. Everyone clear? 18 heads nodded. Good. Sunrise is 6:42 a.m. We roll to the church at 6:30. I want absolute silence when we arrive. Cut engines 2 blocks out, coast in. Grace has been through enough. Let's not give her a heart attack with 1,400 bikes roaring up at dawn. Once in position, Marcus finds Grace and explains. Then we start building. Projected timeline is 7 days for full reconstruction. We work dawn to midnight. Shifts rotate every 6 hours. Food handled by Maria's catering crew. Medical handled by Steel Pilgrim's medical professionals. 4 nurses, 2 doctors in convoy. Safety protocols non-negotiable. Hard hats, steel-toed boots, proper lifting. Anyone gets hurt being careless, I personally kick them out. This is about showing the world what we can do. Let's do it right. Presidents dispersed to brief their chapters. As darkness fell over Los Angeles, 1,418 bikers settled for the night. Some slept in tents, some in vehicles. Some didn't sleep at all, too energized by what was coming. Marcus sat alone on his bike watching stars emerge. Tomorrow at dawn, they would ride to 42nd and Avalon. Tomorrow they would find Grace Williams, probably still in those ruins, still believing she was alone. Tomorrow they would show her that $20 had bought something priceless, proof that goodness multiplies when shared. He thought about calling, warning, preparing her. But something said this needed to be a surprise. She needed to see it happen without expectation, without hope clouding perception. She needed the full impact of 1,400 motorcycles appearing at dawn. Somewhere in South Los Angeles, Grace Williams was having the worst 3 days of her life. She didn't know her darkest moment was about to give way to something spectacular. She didn't know that before the sun rose again, the street that abandoned her would be filled with engines and exhaust and leather-clad angels who'd ridden from across California to honor her kindness. All she knew was darkness and cold and ashes. Sometimes that's exactly the soil where miracles grow best. At midnight, Ray gave final order. Everyone get rest. Tomorrow we show the world what Steel Pilgrims means. Tomorrow we build something that will last longer than any of us. Tomorrow we honor a woman who reminded us why we ride together. Sleep well, brothers and sisters. At dawn, we change everything. 1,418 bikers settled into silence. The city slept around them, unaware that at sunrise, something extraordinary was about to happen on 42nd and Avalon. Something that would make headlines, inspire thousands, and prove that humanity's capacity for kindness far exceeds its capacity for cruelty. Grace Williams slept alone in ruins, convinced she was forgotten. In 6 hours, she would learn otherwise. In 6 hours, thunder would shake the ground beneath her feet. In 6 hours, everything would change. But for now, darkness held. For now, silence reigned. For now, the angels slept, gathering strength for the miracle they would deliver at dawn. Grace woke to birds, sparrows picking through debris for insects. The morning air was cool, and for one merciful moment before consciousness returned, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. Concrete beneath her, smoke smell clinging to everything, ache in her bones from sleeping on rubble. She sat up slowly, spine protesting. 6:17 a.m. The board meeting was tonight at 7, 12 hours until Thompson and the others voted to sell, to erase 78 years, to transform holy ground into luxury apartments. Grace looked around. In early light, the ruins seemed even more desolate. Blackened walls reaching toward sky like broken fingers. Collapsed pews scattered like fallen soldiers. The cross from the steeple, somehow intact, lying on its side among ashes, as if even Christ himself had given up and fallen. 3 blocks away, Thompson was having the best morning of his life. Standing in his kitchen making coffee, mentally calculating property values. $2.7 million for the land. Minus legal fees, minus distribution costs. Each congregation member would receive approximately $43,000. Not bad at all. His phone buzzed with board member messages. Everyone supported the sale. Even Betty Morrison had texted support last night. It's the practical choice. Grace will understand eventually. Thompson smiled. Grace wouldn't understand, but Grace wouldn't have a choice. Democracy in action. By this time next month, developers would be breaking ground on something that actually generated revenue, actually served economic interests, actually made sense. He thought briefly about Grace sitting in those ruins, probably confused, probably hurt. A small guilt twinge tried to surface, but he pushed it down. Business wasn't personal. Leadership meant making hard choices. Someone had to be the adult. His wife called from upstairs. "Marcus, are you watching the news?" "No, why?" "Turn on Channel 7, now!" Thompson grabbed the remote, flipped to Channel 7. A morning news anchor was speaking, aerial footage playing behind her. What's being called the largest motorcycle mobilization in California history. Over 1,000 riders from the Steel Pilgrims Motorcycle Club spent the night in East Los Angeles, and sources say they're preparing to move at sunrise. The destination and purpose remain unclear, but witnesses report massive quantities of construction materials. We'll continue following this developing story. Thompson's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Steel Pilgrims, 1,000 riders, East Los Angeles. No, it couldn't be. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered automatically. "Deacon Thompson?" Unfamiliar male voice, deep and authoritative. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Raymond Torres, president of the Steel Pilgrims Motorcycle Club, Riverside chapter. I'm calling as courtesy to inform you that your board meeting tonight is canceled." Thompson's hand tightened on the phone. "Excuse me? You can't cancel The property at 42nd and Avalon is not for sale. The church will be rebuilt. If you want to help, you're welcome. If you want to interfere, you won't like the result. Have a blessed day, Deacon." The line went dead. Thompson stood frozen in his kitchen, mind racing. This was insane, illegal, impossible. You couldn't just show up with a motorcycle gang and take over property. There were laws, procedures, rights. He grabbed his keys and ran for his Mercedes. He had to get to the church, had to stop this, He didn't know what he had to do, but he had to do something. What happens when 1,400 motorcycles arrive simultaneously? The answer is about to shake windows 3 miles away. You're about to witness something that will be talked about for decades. At 6:28 a.m., Ray gave the signal. Engines started quietly, throttles barely cracked, exhausts muffled as much as physics allowed. Even so, 1,418 motorcycles starting simultaneously created sound like distant thunder. "Move out," Ray said into his radio. "Slow roll. Maintain silence discipline until we're in position." The convoy began moving, a steel serpent sliding through Los Angeles streets. They'd planned the route carefully, surface streets only, avoiding highways, minimizing noise. This wasn't about intimidation. This was about arrival. At 6:32, residents of 42nd Street began noticing something. Mrs. Chen, opening her corner market, paused with key and lock. Was that an earthquake? No, earthquakes didn't sound like that, didn't build steadily like that, didn't make windows vibrate with rhythmic precision. Paul Rodriguez stepped onto his porch, coffee in hand, and froze. The sound was coming from the east, growing. A low rumble seeming to come from Earth itself. "Maria," he called to his wife, "come out here." Up and down the street, doors opened. People emerged, looking confused, looking worried, looking east toward the source of that impossible sound. Thompson's Mercedes screeched around the corner onto 42nd Street at 6:34. He saw neighbors standing outside, saw them all looking east, saw confused fear on their faces. He parked badly, half on the curb, and ran toward them. "What's happening?" he demanded. Mrs. Chen pointed with shaking hand. "Listen." The sound was unmistakable now. Engines, dozens of them. No, hundreds. No, more than that. The rumble built like an approaching tsunami, a wall of mechanical thunder making the ground shake and air pressure change. Have you ever stood on train tracks as a freight train approached? That physical sensation of something massive coming closer, vibration traveling through your bones, absolute certainty you're about to witness something that cannot be stopped. That's what residents of 42nd Street felt as the convoy approached. At 6:36, the first motorcycle appeared at the intersection 3 blocks east, then another, then 10 more, then 50. Then the intersection filled completely with bikes, and still they kept coming, a flood of chrome and leather and purpose showing no sign of ending. Thompson's mouth went dry. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. His brain simply refused to process what his eyes were seeing. The bikes rolled forward slowly, deliberately, engines now roaring openly because stealth was no longer necessary. The sound was apocalyptic, a physical force rattling windows, setting off car alarms, making the very air vibrate. It wasn't just noise, it was announcement, it was declaration, it was 1,400 voices saying in perfect unison, "We are here." Mrs. Chen dropped her keys. Paul Rodriguez's coffee cup slipped from his fingers and shattered. Betty Morrison, who'd driven over at 5 a.m. hoping to find Grace, stood on the sidewalk with tears already streaming because she understood, finally, fully understood, what was happening. The convoy filled the street like a river of metal. 2 blocks, 3 blocks, 4 blocks of continuous motorcycles moving in tight formation, riders sitting straight and proud, patches visible on every jacket. Steel Pilgrims, MC, Riverside, San Diego, Oakland, Fresno, Pomona. Chapters from across California, united in purpose. Behind the motorcycles came trucks, supply trucks loaded with lumber, beds stacked 8 feet high, flatbeds carrying generators and power tools, vans with company names painted on windows, Rodriguez Roofing, Chen Electric, Martinez Plumbing, Torres Construction. Behind those, mobile kitchen, command center, crane trucks with booms folded but clearly ready for deployment. Thompson stood paralyzed as the convoy passed. This wasn't a protest. This wasn't a demonstration. This was an invasion. Peaceful, purposeful, unstoppable. The lead bikes reached the church ruins and stopped. Engines cut. In the sudden silence, Thompson could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. One by one, 1,418 engines shut down, and the silence that followed was somehow more impressive than the noise had been. Riders dismounted. Not chaotically, with military precision, they formed ranks, standing at attention, waiting. Supply trucks backed into position. Workers began unloading materials with practiced efficiency. Someone erected a command tent in less than 3 minutes. And through it all, Grace Williams sat in the ruins, frozen in shock, unable to comprehend what her eyes were seeing. Ray walked forward, massive frame moving with surprising grace. Behind him, Marcus followed, and behind Marcus, 400 other riders formed protective escort. They moved toward where Grace sat, this small, elderly woman surrounded by ashes, and the sight of her, alone, confused, clearly having spent multiple nights in ruins, made every single Steel Pilgrim's jaw tighten with rage at how she'd been abandoned. Ray stopped 5 feet away and removed his helmet. His weathered face split into gentle smile. "Elder Grace Williams?" Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes?" "My name is Raymond Torres. I'm president of the Steel Pilgrims Motorcycle Club. This," he gestured to the army of bikers behind him, "is your construction crew. We're here to rebuild your church." Grace stared at him, at the riders, at the trucks, at the impossible scene unfolding. Her brain simply could not process this. I don't understand." Marcus stepped forward, and when he removed his helmet, Grace's breath caught. She knew that face, those eyes. You gave me $20 3 days ago, Marcus said, voice thick with emotion. I told you I'd pay it back tenfold. I'm a man of my word. Grace's hand went to her mouth. Behind her, Thompson stood frozen, watching his entire plan, his entire worldview, his entire sense of control collapse like the church walls had collapsed in fire. Ray spoke again, voice carrying to every person on the street. Deacon Thompson, congregation members, neighbors, you turned your back on this woman when she needed you most. You judged her for showing kindness. You abandoned her for being better than you were willing to be. His gaze swept across them, and every single person felt its weight. We don't judge you for that. We understand fear. We understand doubt. But understand this, Grace Williams is under Steel Pilgrim's protection now. She is family. And we protect family. He turned back to Grace, voice softening. Elder Williams, we have 1,418 volunteers, 27 truckloads of supplies, and 7 days to build you the most beautiful church you've ever seen. All we need from you is permission to start. Do we have it? Subscribe to this channel right now if you want to see stories about real people proving that kindness still exists, because what happens next will restore your faith in humanity. Hit that subscribe button. Grace looked at this massive, tattooed, terrifying man offering her a miracle. She looked at Marcus, the stranger she'd helped, who'd apparently moved heaven and earth to honor her kindness. She looked at the army of bikers standing ready to work. She looked at her neighbors, shamefaced and silent. She looked at Thompson, his expression shifting from shock to fear to something that might have been understanding's beginning. Then, Grace Williams, 72-year-old church elder who'd lost everything, who'd been abandoned by everyone, who'd spent 3 days in ashes believing she was alone, did something unexpected. She started laughing. Not hysterical laughter, not bitter laughter. Pure, joyful, amazed laughter, coming from a soul recognizing that God worked in mysterious ways, and sometimes those ways included 1,400 bikers showing up at dawn. Yes, she said, still laughing, tears streaming. Yes, you have my permission. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. Ray smiled and turned to his people. You heard the lady? Let's build a church. The cheer that went up shook windows that the engines had already rattled. 1,418 voices, rough and wild and absolutely committed, shouting their readiness to create something beautiful from ashes. And as the sun climbed higher over Los Angeles, as construction began in earnest, as the entire street watched in amazement, Grace Williams finally understood what her $20 had purchased. Proof that kindness never dies. It multiplies beyond measure when given freely. The first hour was organized chaos making perfect sense. Ray had assigned crew chiefs before arrival, each responsible for specific reconstruction aspects. Tommy Martinez, the roofer, commanded the structural team. Sarah Chen's brother David handled electrical planning. Angela Rodriguez coordinated plumbing crews. Grace stood to the side, still dazed, as 1,400 people transformed from motorcycle riders into construction professionals in minutes. Leather jackets came off, revealing work shirts. Tool belts appeared from saddlebags. Hard hats materialized. Someone erected a safety station with first aid and bottled water. Someone else set up perimeter with caution tape and orange cones. Marcus stayed close to Grace, protective without being intrusive. He could see she was overwhelmed, anyone would be, and he wanted to give her space while ensuring she felt safe. Elder Williams, he said gently, we should probably get you cleaned up, maybe get breakfast. Maria's already cooking. I need to know something first. Grace turned to face him fully, eyes searching his face. Why? Why would you do this? $20 doesn't buy all this. This isn't about repaying a debt. This is something else. Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment he'd been both anticipating and dreading since Ray approved the mobilization. Do you remember a traffic accident 30 years ago? Highway 60 near Moreno Valley? A motorcycle crashed, a gas tank ruptured, caught fire? Grace's eyes widened. Robert pulled someone out of that fire, burned his hands badly doing it. They never healed quite right. He always had those scars on his palms. That someone was me. Marcus's voice cracked. I was 22 years old, riding a bike I'd rebuilt myself but hadn't properly maintained. Fuel line failed at 70 miles per hour. I crashed, bike landed on my leg, gas ignited. I was conscious but trapped. I could feel flames spreading, could smell my own skin burning. I knew I was going to die. Construction noise continued around them, but in this moment, Marcus and Grace existed in their own bubble of time. Then someone was there, this man I'd never seen before. Didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate, just grabbed me and pulled. The bike was probably 300 pounds, and he lifted it like nothing. Got me clear. Burned his hands doing it, exactly like you said. He stayed with me until the ambulance came. Gave his name to police, Robert Williams. But by the time I got out of the hospital 3 weeks later, I couldn't find him. No phone listing, no address. Just disappeared. Tears were streaming down Grace's face now. I spent 30 years looking for him, Marcus continued. 30 years trying to find the man who saved my life so I could thank him, so I could repay him, so I could tell him that because of what he did, I got married, had 3 kids, built a business, lived a life, and I never found him. Then, 3 days ago, this elderly woman tells me her name is Grace Williams, that she's from St. Matthew's Community Church, and I thought, could it be? Could this possibly be connected? He pulled out his phone, showed Grace a photo. I called my mother that night, asked her to check old newspaper clippings she'd saved from the accident. She sent me this. Grace looked at the photo, a newspaper article from 30 years ago. Good Samaritan saves motorcyclist from burning wreck. And there, in grainy black and white newsprint, was Robert's face. Younger, unlined by age, but unmistakably her husband. He never told me, Grace whispered. He never said he saved someone's life. That's because he was Robert Williams. Marcus smiled through his own tears. From what I heard about him, asked around after I made the connection, he was the kind of man who did good things without needing credit. The kind of man who ushered a church and learned everyone's name and helped people without expecting thanks. The kind of man who raised someone like you, someone who gives their last $20 to a stranger. Grace's legs went weak. Marcus caught her, guided her to sit on clean lumber someone had just unloaded. Your husband gave me 30 years of life I wouldn't have had, Marcus said, kneeling before her. I married my wife Jennifer because of him. My 3 kids, David, Sarah, and Robert, exist because of him. I named my youngest son after him, even though I never found him to ask permission. Everything I am, everything I've built, everything I've accomplished. It's because Robert Williams saw someone in trouble and didn't hesitate. He gestured to the army of workers around them. When you gave me that $20, you didn't just help me. You reminded me of why I'm alive. You showed me the same spirit your husband had, and I realized this was it. This was how I finally repay the debt, not to Robert directly, because I can't, but to you, to his legacy, to the church he served, to the community he loved. Ray had walked over during this exchange, along with several other chapter presidents. They'd heard the story, but hearing Marcus tell it directly to Grace hit differently. Grace looked up at these rough, tough men and women, covered in tattoos, wearing leather, looking like the kind of people society taught you to fear, and she saw them clearly for the first time. Not as threats, not as dangers, as human beings who understood loyalty, who honored debts, who believed that goodness should be repaid with goodness. Robert would have loved this, she said quietly. He would have loved knowing that his 30 seconds of bravery created all this, that it rippled forward through time and came back as 1,400 angels wearing motorcycle boots. By noon, the transformation was remarkable. Ruins completely cleared, debris removed, foundation exposed and inspected, ground leveled. A professional surveyor from San Diego chapter had mapped the entire property, confirming original foundation was solid and could support new structure. Tommy's roofing crew had erected a massive tent over the work area, providing shade for workers and rain protection. Under that tent, construction proceeded with military precision. Concrete crews poured new foundation sections where fire had weakened the original. Framers began erecting walls using pre-cut lumber. Someone had pulled original church blueprints from city records and worked all night to create material lists. Electrical team ran conduit while plumbers roughed in water lines. A crane, the massive one from Oakland, lifted materials with surgical precision, operated by a woman named Rosa, who'd been running heavy equipment for 25 years. Grace walked through organized chaos with Marcus as her guide, amazed at the professionalism. This wasn't amateurs playing construction worker. These were experts in their fields, volunteering their skills. "How many contractors do you have here?" she asked. "Actual count?" Marcus consulted a clipboard. 237 licensed professionals, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, roofers, concrete specialists, HVAC techs, painters, plus about 300 skilled laborers who know their way around construction sites. The rest are support, cooking, organizing supplies, handling logistics, providing medical coverage, documenting everything for legal purposes. Legal purposes? "We're building this by the book, Elder Williams. Every code, every regulation, every permit. We've got a city inspector coming this afternoon to verify everything. We're not just rebuilding your church. We're building it better than before. Fire-resistant materials, updated electrical, modern plumbing, structural improvements. When we're done, this church will stand for another 100 years minimum." They passed the mobile kitchen where Maria and her crew prepared lunch. The smell of grilled chicken, rice, and vegetables filled the air. Maria waved them over. "Elder Williams, you need to eat. When's the last time you had a real meal?" Grace tried to remember and couldn't. 2 days? 3? "Sit." Maria pointed to a folding chair. "I'm not asking." Within minutes, Grace had a plate piled high with food and cold bottled water. As she ate, realizing how hungry she actually was, she watched construction continue. The rhythm was hypnotic. The sound of hammers, the whine of saws, the beep of the crane backing up, the chatter of workers calling measurements. This is what love looks like, she thought. Not romantic love, not family love, but human love. The love that sees a stranger in need and responds with everything you have. A shadow fell across her table. She looked up to see Thompson standing there, looking smaller somehow, diminished. His expensive suit was dusty, and his face showed signs of a man wrestling with himself. "Elder Williams," he said quietly, "may I speak with you?" Grace gestured to an empty chair. "Sit." Thompson sat and for a long moment said nothing. Around them, construction continued. The noise provided cover for private conversation. "I was wrong," Thompson finally said, "about everything, about you, about the church, about what matters." "You were practical," Grace said without malice. "You were trying to help people the only way you knew how." "No," Thompson shook his head. "I was protecting my investment. I bought property near the church 3 years ago, banking on development in this area. If we sold the church land, it would have driven up property values. I would have made probably $500,000. That's why I pushed so hard for the sale. That's why He couldn't finish. "That's why you turned everyone against me?" "Yes." The admission seemed to cost him everything. "I convinced myself it was practical, logical, in the congregation's best interest, but really, I was just protecting my money." Grace ate slowly, thinking. "Do you know what the worst part is, Deacon?" "What?" "If you'd just been honest from the start, I would have understood. Robert and I struggled financially our entire lives. I understand the temptation of a big payday. I understand wanting security. I would have disagreed with you, but I would have understood." She looked at him directly. "What I can't understand is using my act of kindness, helping someone in need, as a weapon against me, making me look foolish for living the values we preached from that pulpit for 43 years. Thompson's face crumpled. I know, and I'm sorry, and nothing I say will make it right." "You're correct. Nothing you say will make it right." Grace set down her fork. "But something you do might start to balance the scales. You see all these people working? They're doing it for free, volunteering their time, their skills, their resources. If you want to make this right, you don't apologize to me. You join them. You grab a hammer and you build. You prove that you understand what really matters." Thompson looked toward the construction site, then back at Grace. "I don't know anything about construction." "Then you learn. There's probably 100 jobs that don't require expertise, carrying supplies, cleaning up debris, bringing water to workers, doing whatever needs doing." Grace's voice softened slightly. "Deacon Thompson, I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences. You damaged this community. You damaged people's trust. If you want to repair that, you work. Not for recognition, not for praise. You work because it's right. Thompson stood slowly. Thank you, Elder Williams, for being better than I deserve. He walked toward the construction site, stopped at the supply tent, and asked where he was needed. Someone handed him a shovel and pointed to a section needing excavation. Thompson removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and started digging. Marcus, who'd watched the exchange from discreet distance, came over. You're a better person than most, Elder Williams. I'm a person who's been shown extraordinary grace today, Grace said. How can I not extend the same to others? By 3 p.m., foundation work was complete. By 5 p.m., walls were framed. By 7 p.m., the exact time the board meeting would have happened, roof trusses were in place. The speed was incredible, made possible by hundreds of skilled workers operating in perfect coordination. As the sun set, Ray called halt to major construction. Safety first. Some work couldn't be done safely in darkness, but the day's progress was staggering. What would have taken conventional crew 3 weeks had been accomplished in 12 hours. Ray gathered everyone for a brief meeting. 1,400 people in hard hats, covered in dust and sweat, looking exhausted but satisfied. Today we framed a church, Ray said simply. Tomorrow we roof it, run electrical and plumbing, start interior work. Day 3, we finish mechanical systems and begin painting. Day 4, we install fixtures and flooring. Day 5, we furnish and decorate. Day 6, we landscape and finalize. Day 7, he smiled, we rest because even God took the 7th day off. Laughter rippled through the crowd. I want everyone to look around. Look at what we built today. This isn't just a church. This is proof. Proof that when good people work together, miracles happen. Proof that brotherhood means something beyond ourselves. Proof that one act of kindness, $20 given freely, can change the world. He gestured to Grace, who'd been standing to the side. Elder Williams, would you like to say anything? Grace stepped forward, suddenly conscious of 1,400 pairs of eyes on her. She'd preached thousands of sermons, but finding words for this moment was harder than any sermon she'd ever given. When I was a little girl in Alabama, she began, my grandmother used to say, Grace, baby, kindness is never wasted. It's like bread on the water. You cast it out and someday it comes back to feed you. I never really understood what she meant until today. Her voice strengthened. 30 years ago, my husband Robert saved a young man's life because it was the right thing to do. He never told me about it, never sought credit or recognition, just did what needed doing and moved on. 3 days ago, I gave $20 to a stranger because it was the right thing to do. I didn't expect anything in return. And today, she gestured to the framed structure rising from ashes. Today I learned that my grandmother was right. Kindness comes back, not always how you expect, not always when you expect, but it comes back multiplied beyond measure. She looked at each face she could see. You are all proof that humanity is better than we sometimes believe. You are all proof that there are still heroes in the world. And you are all proof that God works in mysterious ways, sometimes through angels, sometimes through prophets, and sometimes through 1,400 bikers who understand that brotherhood means protecting those who can't protect themselves. Grace's voice broke with emotion. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, from the depths of my soul, from the memory of my husband who started this chain of kindness 30 years ago. Thank you. The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. 1,400 people clapping, whistling, shouting approval. Not for themselves. For Grace, for Robert's memory, for proof that good things still happened in a world that often felt dark. As night fell over Los Angeles, as workers dispersed to rest before tomorrow's labor, as Grace finally accepted a ride to a hotel room that steel pilgrims had reserved for her, the framed church stood silhouetted against starlit sky. Incomplete but undeniable, rising from ashes, reaching toward heaven, proof that sometimes when you cast bread upon waters, it comes back as a feast. Days 2 through 6 blurred together in symphony of construction, the roof completed by noon on day 2, electrical and plumbing roughed in by day 3, interior walls, painting, fixtures installed by days 4 and 5. On day 6, the stained glass window arrived, a masterpiece showing a motorcycle and cross intertwined with text below. Robert Williams, 1948-2018, a life given, a legacy lived. When it was installed, everyone gathered to see it. The window caught morning sun and threw rainbows across the sanctuary floor. Grace stood before it, Marcus beside her, both crying openly. Behind them, 300 bikers stood in respectful silence, heads bowed, honoring a man most had never met but whose actions brought them all together. The cross for the steeple was installed next, massive steel structure designed to withstand earthquakes and wildfires, lit with LED lights visible for blocks. As the crane lifted it into place, someone started singing Amazing Grace. Others joined in, rough voices blending into something surprisingly beautiful. By the time the cross was secured, 400 people were singing, sound carrying across the neighborhood, drawing people from their homes to watch and listen. Mrs. Chen stood on her porch with tears streaming. I judged her. I turned my back on Grace when she needed me most, and look what she brought to our neighborhood. Look at the miracle that grew from her kindness. Day 7, Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Grace stood at the front door of her church, wearing her best dress, the one she'd worn to Robert's funeral 7 years ago. Behind her, the sanctuary was filling. The original congregation, 35 members who'd stayed faithful, sat in front pews. Betty Morrison crying softly. Paul and Maria Rodriguez holding hands. Mrs. Chen with her family. Even the city inspector impressed by construction quality. Behind them, 1,400 bikers filled every other seat. They'd dressed up, button-down shirts instead of leather, clean jeans instead of road-worn denim, though most still wore vests with patches. Out of respect. Out of recognition that this was holy ground and they were guests. And in the back row, by himself, sat Deacon Marcus Thompson. 6 days of hard labor had changed him, hands calloused, face sunburned, expensive clothes replaced with work gear. But more than physical changes, something in his expression was different, humbled, genuine, redeemed. Grace walked to the pulpit, new but designed to match the old one's style. She looked out at this impossible congregation of church members and bikers, at proof that miracles still happened. 43 years ago, she began, I stood at this pulpit for the first time as newly appointed elder. My husband Robert sat right there. She pointed to a middle pew, and he smiled at me the way he always did when he was proud. I was terrified. Sure I'd mess up, sure I'd say the wrong thing, sure I wasn't worthy. She paused, letting memory settle. Robert told me afterward, Grace, you don't become worthy of service. You become worthy through service. Just show up, just do the work, just love people. The rest takes care of itself. Her voice strengthened. 11 days ago, this church burned. Everything we'd built over 78 years, gone in 3 hours. Insurance wouldn't cover rebuilding. The board wanted to sell. My congregation turned their backs for helping a stranger. And I sat in those ashes believing I was alone, believing I'd failed, believing maybe kindness was just foolishness. She looked directly at Marcus. Then a stranger I'd given $20 came back, with 1,400 brothers and sisters, with supplies and skills and determination, with proof that my $20 hadn't bought gas. It had bought hope. It had bought faith. It had bought the answer to a question I'd asked my whole life. Does goodness still exist? Grace's voice broke with emotion. And the answer, the beautiful, overwhelming, miraculous answer, is yes. Goodness exists. It exists in motorcycle clubs who mobilize across California to help a woman they've never met. It exists in workers who donate time and skills to rebuild something beautiful. It exists in neighbors who realize their mistakes and work to make them right. It exists in a man named Robert Williams who pulled a stranger from burning wreckage 30 years ago and never told anyone because real heroes don't seek credit. She gestured to the stained glass window, rainbows dancing across the congregation. That window represents everything I believe about humanity. We are all motorcycles and crosses, metal and faith, earthly and divine. We are all capable of cruelty and kindness, selfishness and sacrifice, hate and love. The question isn't what we're capable of, it's what we choose. Grace held up the framed $20 bill Marcus had returned to her. This is what $20 can buy when you give it freely, without expectation, because it's right. This is what kindness looks like when it multiplies. This is what grace the gift I was named for, looks like in action. She set the frame on the pulpit. Matthew 25 says, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Marcus was hungry, and I fed him, gave him gas money. He was a stranger, and I invited him in, treated him with dignity. And in doing so, I didn't just help Marcus. I honored Robert's legacy. I honored every principle I've preached for 4 decades. I honored the God who teaches that kindness is never wasted, that love always wins, that brotherhood means standing together for what's right. The service that followed was unlike any in St. Matthew's 78-year history. Hymns sung by rough voices alongside trained church choir. Prayers offered by tattooed hands folded in reverence. Communion shared between grandmothers who'd attended for decades and bikers who'd never set foot in church before. When it ended, people lingered. Mrs. Chen invited several steel pilgrims to her market for lunch. Paul Rodriguez exchanged phone numbers with 3 bikers wanting to learn about community organizing. Betty Morrison asked Carmen about starting a women's riding club. Never too old to learn something new. And Thompson approached Ray and Marcus, extending his hand. I owe you both an apology, and I owe this community years of real service to make up for my selfishness. If you'll have me, I'd like to help maintain this church. Keep it beautiful. Honor what you've built. Ray shook his hand. Grace forgave you. That's good enough for us. Welcome to the family, Deacon. Just remember, family doesn't let family forget their responsibilities. I won't forget, Thompson promised. I can't afford to. You've all shown me what real leadership looks like. As afternoon sun climbed higher, as people gradually dispersed, as 1,400 motorcycles prepared for long rides home, Grace stood in the sanctuary alone for a moment. She looked at Robert's window, at rainbows still dancing, at proof that her husband's 30-second act of bravery had created something eternal. We did good, Robert, she whispered. You and me and Marcus and all these angels in leather. We showed them that kindness never dies. It just transforms into something even more beautiful. Outside, engines started roaring, not aggressive or threatening, but celebratory. One by one, 1,400 motorcycles rolled past the church, each rider saluting Grace as they passed, a gesture of respect, a promise to return if ever needed, a bond that would last beyond this moment, this day, this year. Marcus was last to leave. He hugged Grace tightly, this elderly woman who'd changed his life, who'd honored his Savior's memory, who'd reminded him why being saved 30 years ago had mattered. I'll be back next month, he promised. First Sunday, and the month after that, and the month after that. You're family now, Elder Williams. Steel pilgrims protect family forever. I'm counting on it, Grace smiled. Someone needs to keep teaching you all how to sing hymns properly. Marcus laughed, mounted his bike, and rode away. Thunder of his engine fading into Los Angeles afternoon until only silence and sunlight remained. Grace walked home slowly, past neighbors who smiled and waved, past Mrs. Chen who offered free groceries, past the Rodriguez family who invited her for dinner. The street that had turned its back now embraced her. The community that had abandoned her now claimed her as hero. But Grace knew the truth. She wasn't the hero. Robert wasn't the hero. Marcus wasn't the hero. The steel pilgrims weren't the heroes. They were all just people choosing kindness over cruelty, love over hate, brotherhood over isolation. And those choices, those simple, daily, seemingly insignificant choices, had created something miraculous. That night, Grace sat in her apartment and wrote a letter. To the universe, to God, to whoever might listen. Dear world, today I learned that $20 can change everything, that kindness multiplies when shared freely, that strangers become family when united by purpose, that buildings can be rebuilt stronger than before, that humanity, for all its flaws and failures and cruelties, is still capable of breathtaking goodness. Thank you for teaching me this lesson. Thank you for sending angels wearing leather and riding motorcycles. Thank you for proving that my Robert's legacy lives on in ways we never imagined. And thank you for reminding me that grace is never wasted when given from the heart. Amen. She folded the letter, tucked it into her Bible, and slept peacefully for the first time in 2 weeks. And somewhere in California, on highways heading in every direction, 1,400 bikers rode home carrying stories they would tell for the rest of their lives. Stories about an elderly church elder who gave her last $20 to a stranger. Stories about how that stranger mobilized an army to honor her kindness. Stories about how one act of goodness rippled forward through 30 years and created a miracle that would inspire thousands. Because that's what kindness does. It ripples forward, it multiplies, it transforms strangers into family and ashes into beauty and despair into hope. It proves that even in our darkest moments, even when we believe we're alone, even when everything seems lost, grace finds a way to break through and remind us that love always wins. Always.